They did this full-on switcheroo, and part of this was because they come out of this foreign policy establishment around diplomacy, defense, and intelligence, and the candidates who were threatening the foreign policy consensus, both in the US and around the world, had to be stopped at the information level because they were gaining so much popularity on social media. They blamed social media for Donald Trump's election. They blamed it for Brexit. They blamed it for Bolsonaro in Brazil, Modi in India, Salvini in Italy, Marine Le Pen's rise in France. They were afraid that this is after the 2016 election, that unless social media was stopped, there was going to be this domino where Brexit would give rise to Frexit, and Italexit, and Grexit in Greece, and Spexit in Spain. The EU would come undone. NATO would come undone. There'd be no enforcement arm for the IMF. The rules-based international order would all dissolve if people were allowed to vote to not be a part of these international institutions that these people happen to be sitting in.
So who or what among elected or appointed officials in the Trump administration, I'm going to guess without the knowledge of President Trump at the time, because this is what he hates, who or what caused this to happen? How did it come about that CISA went from looking for Russian agents to looking for ordinary Americans?
Well, this was part of a long-range plan that happened really during the transition right after the 2016 election, when Russiagate was getting cooked up in its infancy. This started with really a State Department dirty diplomats coup. The same diplomats who were in charge of the sanctions rallying in Europe after the Crimea annexation in 2014 ended up doing this, running back their European roadshow to create a transatlantic consensus on stopping disinformation in early 2017. So you had these folks like Ambassador Daniel Fried, who was at 40 years at the State Department, served under 7 presidents. He's a board member at the National Endowment for Democracy, which is the most prominent CIA cutout of all the NGOs. He was Obama's sanctions coordinator after the Crimea annexation, getting all the European countries to saw off their own legs despite Russia. He had all of these connections with European regulators. When Trump won the 2016 election, he left the State Department, joined the Atlantic Council, which is a huge hot pot of NATO intrigues. They have 7 CIA directors on their board. They were sponsored by Burisma. It's a whole mess. Daniel Fried helps lead these global disinformation conferences in 2017, along with a cohort of people from the State Department who all thought they were going to get promotions to the National Security Council after Hillary Clinton won the election. And then when Trump won, they basically created this transatlantic shadow, maybe government's too strong a word, but shadow coalition, where they then got European countries to pass all of these censorship regulations, forcing AI censorship to be installed all across Europe, which had a blowback in having these social media companies then adopt AI mass censorship in the US for market continuity and to satisfy the Senate Intelligence Committee under Mark Warner, who was threatening to break up the tech companies unless they censored their political opponents. So you had this, you had this State Department, Defense Department, CIA nexus around controlling information flows to stop the rise of populist political candidates who would undermine the foreign policy consensus.
How